Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Pandemic Food. That 15-pound bag of rice is waiting to be cooked. Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by The Silver Doe, the best true crime novel since Truman Capote. Leave the lights on when you read Darby Hart's The Silver Doe. I slipped into VO voice there for a second. Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. Writing, directing, editing. We use all of that, inside acting, and other such stuff. And we use all of that as we pull apart films, see what they're made of. That's why we're The Pestle. We grind it up and make a little movie dough. And then we sling it around for some movie pizza. Or something. I don't know where that's going.
We are perpetually in an Alamo Draft House.
That's true. That actually, I went to back-to-back movies the last 2 days, and it was glorious. Yeah, I haven't been able to really go for the last couple of weeks, and so I was like, okay, I think my headspace is clear enough where I can focus and watch people do superhuman acts of everything that happens in movies these days. So we analyze films, and it's fun. I don't know, man. I'm really excited about today. We got a lot going on. And so, let's just dive right in. What are we covering today?
Today, we are covering Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause this episode and go watch it, because there's going to be a lot that we're going to spoil if you haven't seen it.
You're right. We're going to spoil it all, just like Clint. And so we'll cover a bunch of things. We'll definitely look at some of the cinematography, contrast, silhouetting. We'll look into some of the story and writing. Will versus Bill. Deserves got nothing to do with it. And then at the very end, stay tuned, because we have a special treat, a new Mad Valley track called All of Me. Very excited about that. And we're going to cover all of that and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Retired Old West gunslinger William Munny reluctantly takes on one last job with the help of his old partner Ned and a young man, the Schofield Kid. It's directed by Clint Eastwood, screenplay by David Webb Peoples, cinematography by Jack N. Green, featuring Clint Eastwood as William Munny, Gene Hackman as Little Bill, Morgan Freeman as Ned, Jaimz Woolvett as the Schofield Kid, Richard Harris as English Bob, Saul Rubinek as Mr. Beauchamp, and Anna Thomson as Delilah.
Well done.
She don't like it much, does she? You riding off with me.
Sally?
Gave me the evil eye.
Well, you know, Sally's engine, and engines ain't over-friendly, Will.
I don't blame her. I ain't gonna hold it against her. She knew me back then. She knew what a no-good son of a bitch I was. She just ain't allowing that I changed. She don't realize I ain't like that no more.
Well, you know, Will.
I ain't the same, Ned. Claudia, she straightened me up. Cleared me of drinking whiskey and all. Just because we're going on this killing, that don't mean I'm going to go back to being the way I was. I just need the money. Get a new start for them youngsters.
Yeah.
Ned, you remember that drover I shot through the mouth and his teeth came out the back of his head?
Yeah.
I think about him now and again. He didn't do anything to deserve to get shot. At least nothing I could remember when I sobered up.
He was one crazy son of a bitch, Will.
Yeah, no one liked me. The boys all thought I was gonna shoot him out of pure meanness.
Well, you ain't like that no more.
So, I don't know the last time you saw this. It sounds like it's been a while. Last week you had trouble remembering which old Western film this was even. And so How did they go for you in terms of the flow of the movie? Was there a point where you suddenly bought in, or was it a good film in what we kind of expect from movies today? Yeah, and then in general, like Western films, yay or nay?
Yeah, I've never seen this movie.
Whoa,
I never saw it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, when it came out, I was 12. And that was not a movie that my parents would let me see when I was 12.
This was the first movie I bought an R-rated ticket for. I was way underage.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and I'm typically not a Western fan. Like it's not my style. I just think that they're usually like very tropish, and kind of what to expect. But I think a lot of that comes from a movie like this that did it first, right? And like the gruff old guy, and then like very unforgiving people, and like it's just an unforgiving time, and just brutal in all the ways, but at the same time just kind of like cheesy. And but I will say that if it hadn't been without this podcast, I probably would hate this movie, to be honest. And that's because like I can watch this movie now and look at it from a different lens and pick out. It's kind of like listening to, the Beatles for the first time, where you listen to them and you think, wow, there's so much mid-range. There's no low end, like everything is all tinny, and why are the drums panned hard to the left? Like, and you forget that they had 4 tracks to do all of this stuff. And the way that they got around it was with panning and re-recording over things and bussing things to track. Like they had to do a lot of stuff. And I feel like this movie is a good example of that, of, 92 is not, like the 60s, right? But at the same time, what I think this movie brought was something that no, like other Westerns, at least to that point, really had, which was like 2 sides of a specific character that you really see. Like there is a delineation, a hard delineation in Eastwood's character, in William, that you see that happens. It goes from, just this unsuspecting old guy who just wants to raise his kids, can't even get on a horse, like to the most brutal individual you could imagine by the end. But there is a hard line when he finds out that Ned dies. I feel like that's the line. I mean, yeah, like, he shoots at that guy beforehand and everything, but he just does, he's not really in it. He doesn't want to be that guy again until he hears about Ned, I feel like. And at that point, everything changes, and he becomes what he was before. And we see that now all of a sudden. I feel like that was one of the first times, at least for me, that I had seen a Western where, I was waiting for something to happen and it didn't come. And then I thought, okay, it's not going to come. And there it is, and then he just destroys everyone. And I will say it is super cheesy at parts. Like that shootout at the end is just hilarious to me. And it almost ruined the movie for me, to be honest, because I'm sitting there watching this, and I feel like Eastwood's performance is beautiful and masterful in moments. I thought the clip you played is a perfect example of that. Just being still, like he has a great ability to know when not to do stuff, and kind of did it first, in the 60s with all of his other Westerns, and was just a very stoic kind of player. And so, yeah, anyway, so I feel like his performance was fantastic, and Morgan Freeman too. Gene Hackman, I don't know. I feel like Gene Hackman came into his heyday for me when he's, in the hunt, or in the
Crimson Tide.
What is it? The Crimson. Thank you. And Crimson Tide and stuff like that. Like, I like an old Gene Hackman more than a young one. I just believe it more. That's just me. Morgan Freeman always just destroys it. He's always the same age forever and always.
He really is, yeah.
He's like the Paul Rudd of, like old black guys. Like, I don't know. He's just always the same. And I love it. I love it. You know exactly what you're going to get when Morgan Freeman is on screen. It's always wonderful. And he adds so much, whether he's, like the face in a scene or whether he's supporting, whatever, he just knows what to do. And it's beautiful. Everybody was really good. I mean, Anna Thomson was fantastic. Like her rage was just so perfect. So anyway, I thought, but that last scene, he's around how many guys that all have guns and all of them miss him, but he never doesn't miss any of them. It was just like really frustrating for me, that one scene. But other than that, I thought it was just really beautiful, well done. A little bit slow at points, I feel like, but that's I'm comparing it to today's films today that I like. But again, pulling myself back to the early 90s and to making a film like this, I feel like it's definitely Oscar caliber for sure, especially in the early 90s, and Eastwood just destroyed it. I know it was based on a book. I don't know how closely to the book they stuck.
I don't think I hadn't heard that. To my knowledge, It's not. I think it's an original. What's funny is you talk about how it's slow at times. I think that's what struck me the most on this rewatch, because it's been ages since probably I was in high school. I think I watched it a lot as a kid. And then once I left, high school, never again. It's one of those films that was always floating around either at someone, at holidays or some family always had this. And I was like, oh, yeah, we could watch a little Clint today. And so I probably watched this 20 times as a kid. But watching it now as, a filmmaker, I'm like really surprised at just how oddly peaceful and melancholy this is for a revenge film.
Yeah.
There's this sadness to it, which is really fitting, of course, because of his character and how this isn't him anymore. And yet he's doing this thing that he's gotten over, and it feels like a betrayal. There's all this subtext or this emotional depth to Munny's character, because this is who he used to be. And it's thanks to Claudia, his wife, that he is no longer this thing. And now that he's going back to it, it feels like a betrayal, like he's kind of betraying who she believed him to be, or the man that she turned him into. But at the same time, he also knows he has to do it because of, money reasons. Not to be so on the nose with everything. Like, he's doing it for money. His name is Munny, yada, yada. And so I was just really struck, though, by the tone of this film just being so much, peace. There's this serenity to it, and all these vistas, which is classic cowboy Western stuff, right? You're going to shoot a Western, you better have some vistas. Like, this is all about the photography. That's classic Western storytelling. And I love it for that. But to your point, like the peace, but the calm before the storm, and they do these simple symbolic things in the film, like the storm. Right, the storm rides in with them. Right, it's kind of following Will into town, and same thing with the drinking. Right, Will refuses to drink the entire movie. Like, Ned is constantly pushing on the whiskey on him. He's like, just have a drink. You don't want women. Like, he's just trying to get him to partake in the world a little bit, and he's not when he's sick, not when he's cold. But the moment he starts hearing that Ned was killed, and that's when he starts drinking, because he knows right then and there he's about to go back to his old ways now. He's going to start killing again, and he can't do that sober. And this film just has these so many quiet moments. So when I think the gunfire starts, it's that much more jarring. And the smoke and the crying, right? The kid yelling for water, and he's got this really young voice. And you can see how it's hurting Ned, and Ned's like, I can't be a part of this anymore. And William, on the other hand, is like, man, we signed up for a job. This is what it is. This is what we do. And then, so Ned backs out. Then the kid finally gets a taste of killing, he's done. He's like, you can keep the gun. I'm never using that thing again. Like, killing isn't for everyone. And that's kind of what Bill was talking about. And just those long, quiet moments help punctuate the killing. And the quiet, serene, peaceful music. I think you're right. It does kind of lull you into a false sense of security of, I guess that's just not what this movie's going to be. And then suddenly guns start blazing and people start falling. It's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it is. Maybe it's exactly that. And then the up close personal killing of little Bill, that's brutal. We never see him get shot, but I think combining with the story of the guy who gets his teeth blown through the back of his head, you're just like, you see it well enough in your head, especially while you're watching Clint pull the trigger, William pull the trigger, right? And what's interesting about that edit too, to me, is he squeezes off and we stay there. Normally that's the kind of thing you cut on. You shoot, cut to black, fade in the next scene. Instead, he shoots and we just hang there watching him watch him look at his destruction. Like, that's pretty dark the more you sit and think about what's actually happening in that very moment. We're lingering. The only extra touch they could have done, which I think because of the nature of this film, which I'll touch on in a second, the only extra touch you could have done is like blow blood into his face to really like make you feel queasy about it. But I think the reason they don't, and the reason why it is a little cheesy, because you're right, I'd never thought about it until you pointed it out, and I'm like, God, you're right. It is like just gun smoke. We never see bullets strike. I think in the entire movie we never see a bullet strike. The only actual damage we really see is the girl getting her face cut up. That you see, like, you can see those cuts kind of being formed, and it's probably a little bit of trick photography, right? The angle being concealed until he finishes the knife stroke, but you see those cuts, get hit under her face, and then throughout the rest of the film, though, like the kid in the gulch never gets hit. We just suddenly see blood coming out of his side after a few cuts. But whenever that shot actually hits him, it's we're looking at his legs, and then we reveal it later. And that's to build a little bit of, wait, did he get him? Are they done? Are they not? And then other than that, so the girl, and then in the outhouse, you see the guy get shot in the chest. That's very, clear as day. It's still pretty calm for a guy getting blown open. But you do see that. And I think the emotional charge is the reason for that. Those are both emotionally charged moments. The girl getting cut, you're supposed to feel a certain type of way and you want that revenge. And then the guy getting, blown open by the kid, you want to feel his anxiety later, because in the very next scene, he's regretting all his life decisions. Like, he's like, you know what? Not only was this my first, I've been bullshitting everything up until this moment, and I can't, do it any longer. I'm really not that person. I got to go. And so that's the only reason you ever see anyone really get shot. You might kind of see little Bill get shot and he gets hit in the stomach. But even that there's so much cloud and smoke that's not very clear. I don't know. I'm just really fascinated with your point. But the reason that I think it's a little cheesy is because at the very end of the film, and here's the thing, I think if you ask 10 people what this movie's really about, you're going to get 10 different answers. And I think they're all right. Everyone has their own perspective about it. And a really good story, this apocryphal story I've always heard about Hemingway, talking about The Old Man and the Sea. Someone was like, people say your book is really about, this, and it's really about that. And he's like, I think if you just tell a story honestly, you tell it as honest as you possibly can, it'll transcend whatever you wrote, and people can apply all kinds of meaning to it. If you just tell the story honestly. And to some degree, I think that's what's happening here. And because at the very end of the film, anyway, one interpretation of this is that it's just a love letter. Because at the very end of the film, he dedicates it to Sergio and Don. And of course, if you are familiar at all with Clint Eastwood, he's probably referencing Sergio Leone, who did all those spaghetti westerns, right? The Man with No Name series that he did with Clint, Good, Bad, the Ugly, et cetera, et cetera. And as well as Don Siegel. might be mispronouncing that, Siegel, but who, did Dirty Harry, right? And so to some degree, I can see this film being a combination of both of those worlds, right? Little Bill being a reflection of this Dirty Harry persona, and then the Man with No Name being reflected in William Munny, who's at the end of his life after having done all these crazy things, and he's reflecting on it, and so it's really interesting from that standpoint of just thinking about this purely in that aspect of this is a love letter to Clint's career, and these different characters that he's played, that he's famous for even. And so maybe that's why it's cheesy, is because a lot of those old films weren't all blood and guts, right? It was just a lot of smoke and editing, famous for its editing, in fact. And so you get to that final shootout and it's just, pew, pew, pew. And he's just kind of waving the guns around, and one guy gets scared off and gets shot in the back, and it's messy, and pretty cheesy, I guess.
Well, it's like, you have all of that, everything that happens. And then if I've just felt like they rushed through that scene, the editing is messy and it's slow. Someone gets shot at, and then like a whole beat later they get hit. It's really bad in my opinion, really bad, but I know it's important.
Yeah.
It's like the climax of the whole movie, honestly. So that makes it even more frustrating for me, because I want to love it as much as I really enjoyed the rest of the movie up until then. And I just can't, like, I literally can't watch. Actually, it's really only the actual shootout part. I was in it when he shot the owner, the bar owner guy. I was in it. I was like, oh, here we go. Right. This shit's getting real.
Yep.
He's not forgiven anybody. He's taking no mercy. He told people to move away so he could blow this guy away. He's like, I'm going to let you know that in 5 seconds you're going to be dead. And I was like, oh, this is in it. And then those 7 seconds or whatever it was just were like, what? Anyway, but some other things that I love, the setup for the character, I thought was really, I thought it moved pretty fast. We open with a sex scene, which is, a thing. And then with violence, right? And we open with the whole purpose of the movie. It's boom. Okay. Now they pool their money together and they're going to whatever. But so we open with the action, and then we go straight to Munny. And what is he doing? He's corralling pigs poorly. He's not very good at this. He's old. That's important. Yes, very important. He's dirty. He's old. His pigs are dying. Because they've got the fever paw, and his pigs are dying. His kids are little, right? Yeah. And he can't do this forever. And he obviously has no money. His fence is barely holding together. What? You're laughing. The fever paw. They got the fever paw. And so we're put immediately in a very uncomfortable position for him. Well, I feel uncomfortable just being there, but then for him, I'm uncomfortable for him. And then he gets a traveler whom he's kind to, and gives him coffee or whatever, tea, whatever that is. Yeah. Gives him, he's kind to this traveler who's there asking him to kill somebody. And, I just thought that was a really perfect setup of he's an old guy who cannot handle life right now. He has no money. He's trying to take care of his kids. His livestock is dying and his way of life is dying. And he's got to make a hard decision. Also, I remember thinking when I was watching it, there's no way he can go. What is he going to do with these kids? What does he do? He leaves them at home. He says, I'll be back in 2 weeks. They were like, what? Like 5 and 3 or something? 4 and 2?
Maybe like 4 and 8 is.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because the little girl is talking and walking, but
Yeah.
she might be 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah, she looks small for a 4-year-old, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Point being, this is a very different time in the 1800s, right? And even nowadays, there are cultures where people just leave their kids and they go off and they look for food and stuff, and they'll leave them for days, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that really put me in the time. That him leaving his kids, saying, "Hey, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. If you need anything, you go over to what was her name?
Sally Two Feathers
place or whatever." And so all of that setup with him at his place was gold to me. It was like, oh, I see a purpose for him. I see despair for him. I see his situation that he has to find a way to get out of. And I see, tough decision that he has to make. And also the way that it opens, too, I guess before the sex scene, just like the shot, the beautiful shot of him at the grave, digging the grave, I guess, because we never meet Claudia. His whole reason for being who he is because of Claudia. And he talks about her multiple times in the movie. We never meet her. We just see him digging her grave, right? He was digging her grave, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
What an opening. And we're just watching a silhouette. Immediately it's a Western without having any idea of anything. Okay, this is a Western film. I see a tree. I see a sunset. I see kind of a cabin and a prairie or a plain or whatever it is. Yeah, we're in the West, without seeing any of the West. It's really, really amazingly well set up for me, personally. So yeah, I'd just say that was
damn nicely done. I think, going back to the violence of the bartender, Skinny, or the restaurateur, or whatever that is, saloon, is really interesting to contrast, thinking about the violence of the kid shooting the guy, the knife guy, the cutter, because the kid, and it's interesting just from a tone and directing standpoint, because when the kid shoots his man, there's a nice dramatic push in as he aims, a long dramatic pause, and then the guy begging for his life, right? No, cut back to the kid, bang, 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 right? And then he finally gets into it. And there's a time to move the sequence fast, right? Whenever you're doing something like this, a shoot sequence, right? To highlight the breathless nature of violence or an experienced ruthless killer. And there's also a time to let the moment breathe, right? The kid's been talking a big game up until this point. And now we're kind of asking ourselves, as we're pushing in, like, this is his moment. This is his time. Can he do it? And let's remember this moment too. And the longer we hang out and build it up, the more we're going to remember it, because he's going to be reflecting on it later. And then contrasting that with what, William does with that bartender, Skinny, he does not hesitate a moment. There is no big dramatic push in. This is business as usual for him. He just clears his, his background. Like, hey, y'all going to want to move. Aims, bam. Like, there is no pause, no dramatic anything. It's just game over, lights out. And that's a beautiful contrast in a real killer versus a pretender or a wannabe. It's really fascinating. Yeah, in terms of cinematography, man, the landscape photography in this is freaking amazing. Like, it's just gorgeous. They pick all the right locations. And then they highlight it with these beautiful moments of silhouetting, right? That there's so much contrast in this film, particularly at night, right? The blacks are crushed. There's no detail in any of those blacks. They do a great job of retaining highlights. This is kind of how I like to shoot. Keep the highlights, but crush those blacks, or at least get pretty close. In modern filmmaking, you probably don't crush as often. I don't see anyone crush as often as they're doing in this film. And all that means, crushing the blacks, is just mean you're not retaining any highlights or a detail in the shadows. And it's just completely pitch black. If you were to pull that up on like a vector scope or something, it's just completely, clear.
The scene when they get into town, just to add to that, the scene they get into town when he's going to like kill everybody, and he's riding in the rain with the kid. I mean, I see almost nothing. It is, you're right. It is completely, I'm thinking, how are you riding your horse in absolute darkness? It's crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
It's so good, but it also gives you a lot of opportunity for silhouetting. And that's where you get some of these beautiful shapes, right? That opening and closing with the text, the titles, and that's all, just exposing for the sunset or sunrise, probably a sunset, and just capturing all those beautiful reds and yellows. And whenever you expose for that, everything else gets crushed way down. Especially assuming the sun is probably on the other side of the house, just below the horizon or something, or getting close, somewhere out of screen, obviously. But you crushing, and creating that much contrast makes silhouetting so much easier. And it's a beautiful silhouette at the beginning, right? When he's digging that grave for Claudia, because later on, when we come back to the film, we do another same exact shot, except now they reversed it. The whole angle is reversed. And so now where the grave was on the right, the grave is on the left. And that's just fascinating because now we're going to go meet Will. And it's like he's going backwards. Everything that's about to happen in this story is about undoing what Claudia had done. And so the whole story is about to get upended, for William, from his perspective, everything gets reversed. And that's fascinating. On a cinematography level too, I love anytime I find a split focus diopter shot. It's really fun. It's interesting use, and it's usually pointed. In this case, there's a couple of them. One I think is buried really well in this campfire shot, but the other one that's very on its face and obvious is whenever we're watching Will talk to Delilah. She's the one who got her face cut up, and she's offering him a free one, and of course pretending that she wasn't offering at all, because she feels unlovable, unwantable, now that her face is scarred up. And Will made that, comment earlier, I guess I look like you now. And she's like, yeah, now she's got her feelings hurt, offering him, sex, and him turning it down. And he's like, well, no. And so she walks away, goes and kneels down. And now we cut to this 2-shot where she's in the foreground, he's in the background, but they use a split focus diopter so that they can pull focus to both of their faces. And now doing this allows us to read her reaction without cutting away from the speaker. Normally, a reaction shot is a different shot. You're not really going to get to watch the speaker speak and talk. Instead, you have to pick your poison. Like, we're going to watch him deliver the line, or we're going to watch someone react to the line being delivered and feel what they're feeling emotionally. And in this case, you get to do both. We get to see the sincerity of what he's saying as well as her receiving it. She's like, oh, well, I like this man. He's got something going on beneath, right? He loves his wife, and that's why he doesn't want to be with me. It's not because of how I look or my value or anything like that. It's about him emotionally, and she's connecting with that. And so we get to see all of that just because the cinematographer said, you know what? Let's watch them both and use this, little device that allows us to pull focus to both. It's beautiful. Little simple things like that I appreciate. On a story and writing level, this is some of the good stuff. I like contrasting the two killers that we have in this film, the two real killers, quote unquote, which is Will and English Bob. And so we get to see their stories get told back to back. We start with the writer in jail with English Bob after English Bob got his head kicked in. And we're watching Little Bill read the duck and the whatever. He keeps calling him the duck guy says. and he's reading the story and how English Bob has romanticized and lionized his own evils to the writer, Beauchamp. And Little Bill is reading this story off and he's like, no. I was there. You weren't there. I was there the night he shot, Cocky, whatever, Cochran. And he sets the record straight, right? And he's like, none of that happened. This guy walks in, starts blazing at this guy who has no idea what's happening, and then misses because English Bob is so drunk. The guy goes to pull his gun, and he's going so fast he shoots his own foot off. And English Bob fires again, misses because he's still so drunk. And then finally, Cochran takes aim, shoots, blows his hand off, right? It's a misfire, and it's a known failing of this particular model of Colt. And then English Bob, walks over, aims, blows this guy's head off. And the writer's just aghast. He's like, he shot an unarmed man, and he can't believe it. And so we're hearing the fake story of how, there was 2-1 and he was fighting for this girl. And it's like, none of that's true. This guy is just a coward. Cut to campfire, Will, Ned, and the kid. And the kid is poking Will. Hey, I heard about this amazing gunfight. You had these 2 sheriffs staring you down and you shot them both. And Will, what does he say? I don't recollect. He doesn't want to engage with it. He doesn't want to relive it, let alone lionize his own deeds. And instead, at the end of that scene, what happens? Ned says, well, I remember that night. And it wasn't 2, it was actually 3. And the truth of Will's past is actually worse than the stories that are getting around. What this guy's done, he's killed women and children, blowing them all to bits. Like, his reality is so much worse than what some of these other assassins are doing. And so, of course, English Bob is no match for Little Bill. And that's the next comparison, because it's almost not even a comparison. Whenever you're looking at Will versus Little Bill, I feel like this is just 2 sides of the same coin, the same kind of person. And the way they're living their lives are really interesting and different, but also very similar. Because William and Bill actually have the same name. Like, William and Bill are obviously Will and Bill are derivatives of William, but literally in the credits, if you watch till the end, in the credits, they're both named Bill. Like, we never hear William Munny called Bill the entire movie. But you get to the end and you read the credits, they call him Bill Munny, as well as Little Bill, whatever, Daggett. And so they are just if you're not catching it yet, watch the credits and you can literally see these are both the same 2 sides of the exact same coin, because that's their name. And so, to your point earlier, Will isn't a very good farmer, right? He's got these diseased pigs. They're all dying. He's just not very good at this new life. And at the same time, Bill is trying to carve himself a new life, right? He's left Kansas and Texas and all these wild, rough towns. And now he's just trying to build a nice house. And he wants to drink his coffee and watch the sunset. And Bill isn't a very good carpenter. He's terrible at this. This leaky, crooked house, not a right angle in there, is what one of those guys says. But they're both very good at the real jobs. Killing, right? Enforcing the law. And it's interesting because Will isn't proud of it. Bill is very proud of the work that he does. And that's one of their differences. Very stark. And then we get to the end of the shootout. There's this interesting other contrast that's happening. And I think there's others throughout the film, but the one that stuck out to me is after the shootout, the writer pops up and he says, I'm not armed, right? And what does Will say? Pick up that gun. Now, the same thing happens earlier in the film whenever the writer is, taking all these notes and Little Bill is saying, killing a man isn't easy. He pulls out a gun, slaps the iron on the table, pick it up. And so they're both doing this very same thing of having the writer pick up a weapon, except they're very 2 different intentions here. Because for William, he just wants him to give him the gun. Like, there's no ego involved here. But Little Bill, earlier, he wanted to prove his dominance. That was the whole show of display of you can't kill me. Like, killing is very, very hard and no one can do it. You can't do it. And watch, English Bob isn't even going to do it either. Like, offer him the gun. Now, it would have been very easy for him to just grab it and shoot it. But you know what? At the end of the day, English Bob isn't really a killer the way Bill is. And so watching Little Bill throughout this film is very telling. I think some people watch this movie and think Little Bill is the right one. Like, he's the one trying to enforce the law. He's not. This dude's an evil POS. 2 men at the start of this movie cut up a woman's face They don't even get a whipping or any jail time. There's no sense of justice. Instead, Little Bill just gives them a fine. You're going to give us not even all of their ponies. Some. You're going to give 4. You got 6 or whatever. It's like, what? And whenever he gets reprimanded by Alice, right? Strawberry Alice, she's the madam, the head girl in there. And what does he tell her? Look, these are, just hardworking boys that was foolish.
Dude, God, I can't. Instantly, I hated this dude.
Right. That's our justice system. I mean, that doesn't sound too dissimilar from other very similar situations.
Exactly.
In the modern day. And so this was probably of its time, I can only imagine, and still of its time. Like, this is still relevant 30 some odd years later.
Unfortunately.
And so him making that comment tells you a lot of what you need to know about his brand of justice. And so we get later in the film, not too much later, but English Bob rolls into town, right? And he lets these guys who cut this girl go, but English Bob gets beat to a pulp for bringing a gun. And as a warning to all the villains who would come here, this is a selfish display. He just doesn't want all this riffraff in his town. He just wants a peaceful town for his own selfish reasons, not because he's actually interested in justice or having any semblance of a justice system. It's all of a selfish nature. And then he does the same thing with William Munny, right? He lies about having a gun, beats him to a pulp. He's just trying to get the riffraff out. And also display his dominance. There's no sense of justice going on here, which is also important when you start talking about deserve, right? Again, rewind to the beginning. Strawberry Alice, what'd she say? For what they've done, Skinny gets some ponies and that's it. It ain't fair, Little Bill. It ain't fair, right? And then that story that we heard, that clip that we played at the beginning of the episode, Bill is telling, fast forward, Bill is telling Beauchamp it's not easy to kill a man, then makes his point, right? Pick it up, cock it, point it. Couldn't even put your finger on the trigger. Will is telling the story about it's a hell of a thing to kill a man. Take away all he's got, all he's ever going to have. This is what killing means. And then you get to the end of the film. I don't deserve this, to die like this. I was building a house. And what does he tell him? Deserve's got nothing to do with it. I'll see you in hell. Yeah. Boom. And then we get to the very end of the film, and the very same thing, the very same question that is posed at the very beginning of the film comes back, right? There's this question of, why did Claudia love William in the first place? Right? This beautiful woman from a good home who had prospects. Why does she love William? We get to the end of the film and her mom shows up after William's cleared out, and she just finds her grave, and it says, and there was nothing on the marker to explain why her only daughter had married a known thief and murderer, a man of notoriously vicious and intemperate disposition. There is nothing, there is no fairness, there is no justice, there is no deserve. It's got nothing to do with anything. That's why she loved him, is because you can't explain it. It just is. She just loved who she loved. It turned him into a different person. There's no reason any of this ever happens, and if the more you try to look for it, the probably more confusing it gets. Whereas, you know what? William had to kill because he had to. That was his friend, and he loved his friend. And that's why he had to go and kill Little Bill. That's as much justice or rhyme or reason as you're ever going to have. Why did those women go and put up a bounty on those 2 men? Like, it's not going to get that woman's face uncut. It's not going to bring any real peace to anybody. In fact, it's only going to make things worse. They did it because they had to, because they had self-respect. Even if the rest of the world didn't think they have any self-respect, they did. And that's why they had to do it. Like, there's only rhyme and reason where you want to assign it. And I think that's kind of what's interesting about this movie, is in this world, maybe literally, but maybe more specifically in this Western lawless land, there is no justice. The only justice that exists is the one that you make for yourself. And that's it. I don't know. I don't feel like I have a clear answer. That's as far as I kind of get. I do like that it's invoking this question of justice and morality and sense of deserving. Yeah, I don't know. What do you got, man?
No, I think that's brilliant. I think it's spot on. I mean, and you're right. I think that is it, that the only kind of justice is the justice that you choose to exert, because Ned wouldn't have been dead had Will not gone on this journey and brought him with him in the first place, so, and he wasn't even going for justice that he cared about. He was just going to help his family. He even said it in the clip. He's like, I'm not a killer. I'm not going back to the way I was. I'm just doing this for my kids. And, but if the women hadn't put out that, that bounty, then even the kid wouldn't have killed one of the guys. So like, I get it. It leaves a lot of questions of if then, and I think that's beautiful. And when you said lawless, it made me think of it. It just made me think that, yeah, this does feel like a very lawless time where it almost doesn't matter if you're the sheriff, because you could die just as easy as anybody else, right? In fact, probably more so, and if you shot somebody, not necessarily, like, it's not so easy to discover people, to like find people who have done wrong, unless they literally catch you in the act, like what they did at the beginning, caught the guy cutting up the girl. So it leaves a lot of questions to be asked of like, is what does justice actually mean? And at what point is it what point should you just stop, and the should is different for everybody, like, obviously if somebody hurts somebody that you care about, you're probably going to think like, well, I'm not going to stop, like, I'm an eye for an eye kind of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I think that's like really beautiful to ask, because it's timely. It's timely now as it was in the 90s, as it was in the 60s, as it was in the 1800s, so and this war that Will has with himself is, I think, at the crux of everything, because he is very proud of who he has become. I think that, and not from any volition of his own, because of Claudia. He's very proud of who Claudia turned him into, and he says it multiple times in the film, and he doesn't want to lose that, because that means losing her. But in the end, he does lose her. And so returning back to her grave at the end is like really just a beautiful thing for him to, yeah. And does that mean that, vengeance, you get what you get what you want with vengeance, or you don't? I don't know, because he lost himself, but maybe he found himself again by going back to her. Maybe not. Maybe he's asking for forgiveness and just kind of, there, and he's always going to be this killer forever, or he at least has it inside of him. I don't know. I think it's a great conversation piece, honestly. Which is brilliant for a movie.
Yeah. And it's so well written. Like, I love that final conversation that he has right before he kills little Bill, right? I don't deserve this, to die like this. I was building a house. Deserves got nothing to do with it. And it's so perfectly reflected in earlier dialogue, right? The earlier scene where they're at the campfire. Remember that drover I shot that blew his teeth out the back of his head? He didn't do nothing that deserved to get shot. And then later on, whenever Will is talking to the kid, and he's telling him it's a hell of a thing killing a man. Take away all he's got, like the house he's building, like the future he's trying to build for himself, and all he's ever going to have. right? It's all tied in very much more tightly than it feels, because everything just feels so spread out and sparse. And yet it all stitches together to tell a really interesting, I don't know, blanketed story that connects in an obvious way, I think. Well, obvious once you like see all the pieces together, but yeah, it is a good conversation piece. Like, you could pick out almost any character in this film and have a really interesting conversation just about that character, why they're in the story and what their journey is in the story. I mean, the madam in the house, the Alice, Strawberry Alice, she's like, why is she so hell-bent on putting this bounty together? These women give up all their money to kill someone that didn't do anything directly to them. And it's like, you could analyze her and it's probably all accurate. You could analyze why, Delilah left Texas to go, be a prostitute in some random town and big whiskey. Like, why? What did she leave? What was so bad back home that she had to leave it for this? This is the better life. Well, probably not a lot of options for women back then, right? I mean, you couldn't own land. You couldn't own virtually anything. You get married, you give it all up. And so there's just so many, I don't know, perspectives that are lightly touched on in the film that give you enough to build out their reality, that you could start to extrapolate who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah, it's a really beautiful film in 1,000 ways. And I can see why it won Best Picture, for 1992. It's interesting. I wasn't sure what to expect coming in because it's been so long, but I'm really glad that we
How long had it been for you?
God, bro, it's probably been 20 years. It's probably been 20. Yeah. Like, it's so wild. But watching this, I just remember still going to the movies. My mom had dropped me and my buddy Sam off at the mall, and one other friend, and we were like, yeah, let's go watch Unforgiven. I was like, we don't have anyone old enough to buy it, and I think you had to be like 15 or 16 to buy the ticket. And I was like, I was a really large kid, and so I was like, I'll just go see if they'll sell it to me. And so I told them to wait around the corner, and I walked up to the box office and, yeah, 3 for Unforgiven, please.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man.
Please. It was a big
and one thing I want to say.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say is it's interesting. Like, I love sitting here and talking about movies with you and about particularly kind of older movies. I mean, this movie is over 30 years old now. And we sit here and we say, this is good and this wasn't good. But I just want to be clear to our listeners that like this is just an opinion, and you could have a completely different, you could think this is the greatest movie ever made. And I think there's a lot of people that do.
Yeah.
And that's completely warranted. And when we say, like, I just thought about this because I thought, what if they would have cut out like 20 minutes of this movie? Oh my God, this would to me, because it gets kind of slow about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through, I feel like. And like, oh my God, this could probably be my favorite Western of all time, maybe. But that's just my opinion, So when we sit here and we talk about, well, the shootout was cheesy, or, whatever, that is our experience from the films that we have seen, and the films that we love, and the directors we love, and the actors we love, and the screenplays and all this stuff. That is our opinion, and everyone is entitled to their own. And I feel like what's important to me about this podcast is to be able to actually not just say what I think, but actually believe it. And I think it's so often, we go along with what we think a lot of people think about a movie or music or a book or a TV show or whatever. And we don't stop and think about what we really think.
Yeah.
I can sit here and tell you this Academy Award winning film from 1992 had some really freaking cheesy moments, and it took me out of it, and it was too long by 20 minutes and all that stuff. And that's my opinion, and it's real and it's true and it's valuable, and your opinion can be completely different. And that is also just as true and valuable. And I'm not saying that I could have done any different either. And let's be clear. This is a Clint Eastwood film, and he is a genius at filmmaking. So it's just fun to go in from an outside perspective and say what you like, what you don't like. And I don't think that Eastwood or Tarantino or Nolan or Scorsese would dislike an opinion from someone about their film. I think if you go I would never go up to Tarantino and say, dude, I'm sorry, but you really shat the bed on this. But I could say, I don't understand why you did this. I just really don't understand it. Like, you had me until here, and then at this point he does this, and I just don't get that because it doesn't reconcile. And I feel like that would be a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this podcast and about talking about movies, because of that it could be completely different for somebody else.
I love that. That's such a good point, because you're right. In day-to-day life, we do probably soft pedal our opinions. Like, if someone likes something, the last thing you want to do is tell them why you hate it. Like,
For sure.
It can be such a mean and pointless exercise. Whereas here, it's like, we know we're on the record. To some extent, that's terrifying, because the number of episodes is probably about 99% of the time I forget something that I really wanted to say, or I'm editing and I'm like, I forgot to add this point, or I referenced the wrong point of the film while I was talking about this other thing, and I just flat out get it wrong, and it frustrates me probably more than any listener out there that's like, oh, Wes, you said the wrong name, or whatever, and that's okay. Like, we kind of take that, and that's par for it, but we also know we're being honest. And the freedom to say, you know what, if we're going to be on the record, then we at least better be honest about what we're being on the record about. And that there's something freeing about that, to say, you know what, hopefully, and this is my big fear, honestly, is, I finally make a breakthrough. I get something into Sundance, and I start meeting with studio heads, and I get to pitch to development execs, and they stumble across my podcast, and they're like, oh, you hated Transformers, did you? Like, black this guy out. He's done. It's like, oh man, but what about that other movie you made that I just, wet my pants over? You don't want to talk about that? It's such art, whenever you're creating, is so personal. It's held so close to your vest. I would never hold it against someone that didn't like my work. I expect that, not that I want it, but that's just the nature of creating. And as long as you're not like being mean-spirited about it, I don't really care. But even if you are, I just don't want to hear it. Like, it's not going to stop me from working with you if we want to create something. And hopefully, that's the attitude I run into more than anything, because making 257 episodes, I've probably said some things that might hurt someone's feelings, even though that's never my intention. Like, oh my God, last episode, I was kicking myself for days because I made this joke that did not land whatsoever the way I intended. Because we were talking about how great it was having Trent on. And I made this joke about, because, I have to, we usually get 45 minutes of Todd frowning. And the intention was Todd's frowning at what he has to look at for 45 minutes, not because Todd has a whatever face. It was like, it was meant to poke fun at myself. And I was like, fuck, I completely made it sound like, and every episode I say something, and it's freeing though at the same time to be like, you know what, this is my opinion. There are many like it, but this one is mine, to go Full Metal Jacket on it. And it's nice. It's fun, because you know what, this is a moment where we don't have to worry about other people's thoughts about what we think. And it's okay if we don't like something, and it's amazing if we like different things, because that's the beauty of art. Because we all like different things. We all respond to different things. And expressing that maybe adds perspective to why someone liked something you didn't, or hated something you loved. Anyway, that's my final thoughts, probably, for the film. Final thoughts before Recos?
There's a strange kid in my car. Okay, interesting. I don't know what's going on. Sorry
Horse
about that.
thief.
Yeah, no. That I don't know. No, that was just it. That I loved the idea of it being, a question, leaving us with questions, like really heavy ones and important ones. And I thought it did a great job of developing characters into something that I either loved or hated, and giving some finality to it, but also, leaving it open to dialogue. Thought it was really, really beautiful and well done.
Dude, awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. What are you going to recommend this week?
So it took, I started this show and I stopped it on episode 2, and then I started it again, and then I stopped it on episode 2. And then finally my son was like, can we watch this, please? And I said, all right, fine. And I finished it and I absolutely loved it. I'm going to recommend Loki. I was going to recommend season 2, but you just should watch the whole thing. Like Loki, the series, there's 2 seasons on Disney Plus, and it's lovely and beautiful. And it goes from just like, what am I watching, and kind of slow and whatever. But after like the first 2 episodes, you think, oh, actually this is interesting. Okay. Where's this going? So yeah, I'm going to recommend Loki.
Dude, nicely done. I'll co-sign that, man.
Cool. Oh, really? Okay.
That second season, my God.
Dude, I'm so glad that you think that, because I had no idea what you thought at all. Yeah. And I went into this thinking like, whatever, I'm just gonna, but a friend of mine said that it was his second favorite MCU thing that he's ever seen, behind Endgame. And I thought, wow, that's a statement, whether you are an MCU fan or not. Yeah. I mean, whether you're a superhero fan or not, like that is a statement. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go watch this. So yeah,
I'm excited because there's a question I want to ask you after we wrap.
Cool.
We'll continue that conversation.
Yes.
I'm going to recommend a new show on Hulu. So I guess we're both doing shows this week. It's called A Murder at the End of the World. It's by one of my favorite storytellers, Britt Marling. So if you've seen like Another Earth, we covered Sound of My Voice. She did, I think, Eastern Promises and The AO on Netflix. And so she has a new show with her writing partner, Zal. I cannot pronounce his last name. So they team up together to just tell really good stories. And this one is called The Murder at the End of the World. I've only seen the first episode, so I don't know where it's going. I have high expectations to her detriment. Like she can't surprise me in that sense because I'm already expecting greatness. But I just love her tone, her imagination. Yeah. And so check that out on Hulu. And if you're, stay tuned for next week. We're going to take a week off. And then for the holidays, and the highest holiday of all the seasons is Todd's wife's birthday. And so, and so when we come back, we're going to take a look at the new Ridley Scott film. It's a little indie project called Napoleon with Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby. Very excited about that. And so stay tuned for that. We'll be taking a look at. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. We have a new request in the queue coming in the coming weeks. Someone asked for an old Denzel Washington film. And so I'm excited because I haven't thought about this movie in ages. And so I will let you know about that one in days to come. And so don't forget, if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/unforgiven.
And our quote of the day is from Victor Hugo. Being good is easy. What is difficult is being just.
Ooh.
That is a beautiful, beautiful saying.
It is. So Victor Hugo, of course, wrote a little story called Les Miserables that we've probably all heard of, as well as others, of course, Hunchback. But Les Mis probably has a lot to say about similar themes, about justice and fairness and overcoming your past, things of that nature. And I love that, right? Being good is easy. What is difficult is being just. Justice requires sometimes you to do things you really don't want to do. It's never fun. Like growing up, corporal punishment was a thing. I got spanked a fair amount. And I never got the impression my parents enjoyed it. I would say, I know corporal punishment's out these days, and that's fine. I'm not, for or against any of that. But there's that old Bible verse that Christians love to tout, right? Spare the rod, hate the child. And it's like, it's never easy to punish your kid, because ideally, and this is what my parents did, is you do it because you want to teach them a lesson, not because you enjoy hitting your child. And I never got a sense of joy or excitement from, and my parents never did it out of emotion. It was never like, I'm so mad at you, I'm going to hit you. It was, hey, things have calmed down now. Here's what you did wrong. Here's what we're going to do about it. Let's go. And for that, I always respected them. And it's not easy to do that as a lawman, to walk in and say, man, you guys have done some really bad things. I'm going to get a whip out and I'm going to punish you for it. And then we'll all be square. Even Stevens, because he couldn't do that. The only time he exerted justice was when it was personal to him. You guys have entered my territory. I'm going to exert my dominance on you. He had a terrible community. There was no sense of justice. Instead, being good is really easy. It's always easy to just be nice to people and react out of emotion, because being good is kind of an emotion that you carry, not a sense of justice that you're carrying. And so, yeah, I don't know. That whole conversation is just really fascinating to me. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question there is, what is just, right? What is justice in general? Because I do not spank or hit my kids, and I think that's different from like just with a grown up, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So like, with like my son who's 10, he's the weakest little dude. Like,
Yeah.
like there's no benefit for me hitting him for doing something wrong. Zero. Now, when he gets older, there might be some other, I would never do it, but there might be some other ramification that somebody else physically attacks him. Right. And that may or may not be quote unquote just. I guess it just also depends on what the definition of it is. And if we're talking about justice, like the law, right? Which I'm assuming that's what he's meaning here, because everybody has their own definition of just.
Yeah.
My definition of just, or Will's definition of just, is completely different from Little Bill, right? So what is just, and then back in those days, you said it earlier, this lawless West and everything, like, well, we're not even talking about the law then. So it's a kind of a slippery slope there. So nowadays, hopefully, like, well, not even nowadays, you can be debatable, but hopefully the law is a little bit more buttoned up in many ways, not in all, but in many. And I think that this has a lot more bearing nowadays, according to the law, for me, than probably it did back in the 1800s, I would assume.
Yeah. Well said.
But yeah,
well
beautiful,
said,
beautiful quote. Couldn't agree more.
So now we get to the best part of the episode. Yes. We're going to take a little listen to a new Mad Valley track. That's Todd's band. This one's called All of Me. Sir, anything you want us to know before we hit play?
This one was, I wrote this one kind of in the middle of just the album, and it was something that it wasn't supposed to be a song. It was just like kind of a thing I was playing around with on this VST, this plugin that I had. And then it turned into something really interesting. And then there's an intro with the song that I lost. I literally lost it for about a year.
Oh, wow.
And then right before the album was going to go to mix, I found it. And I remembered, oh, that's right, this whole section was there. And we weren't using it when we were recording because it's about, I don't know, 25, 30 seconds long. And so we just weren't paying attention to it. I said, oh, I want this in there. So I put it in there. And then our friend Jet went in and played guitar on it. And he played the solo on this track, which is one of my favorite moments of the whole record, is his solo. Because I remember getting the first mix back and I let him hear it. And he said, no. This is what you need to tell the guy to do. And he had bullet points of what to tell him to do. And it came back and it was perfect. And it was just awesome. And it's like the biggest sounding, like the way that it comes in is just so huge and awesome. It's so great. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun and interesting stuff behind it, but
yeah. Well, let's take a listen.
All right.
Every morning just for this, but what are you working for if nobody's listening to this? Some people wait for the perfect time, and I was terrified of missing mine, but what are we looking for if nobody's listening to us? Won't you take all of me, torn open at the seams? You can't repair when you leave, or take all of me. Nobody ever wants to be the one giving up. I tried to hold on to the things I love, but all that I thought was real was only a drop in the sea. Do you still want all of me? Won't you take all of me, torn open at the seams? You can't repair when you leave, or take all of me. All of me, won't you take all of me, torn open at the seams? You can't repair when you leave, or take all of me.
Dude. Yeah, that intro is dope, man. Oh my God. The synths, are those like reversed strings? What's happening in that intro?
Yeah, I this was when I first started getting into synthesizers, and I kind of like just had this 4-bar loop thing that I really liked, and then I put some fake strings on it, but I didn't like them, and I reversed them. So yeah, you're right. here I reversed. So the progression was actually reversed. The chord progression was actually reversed. And so when I reversed it, I liked this one better. And so the whole song is like based off of those chords. And then it was just kind of boring. It was just kind of there. And when we were in there, I was trying to think, because my friend Jet, who played guitar on it, I was trying to think, what songs do I want him to play on? And I had I had one or two in my head. And then I thought of this one, and I thought, this one is way too pop for me. And it still is honestly, it's the poppiest song on the record. It's like so formulaic, but I'm okay with that. Like I wanted at least something like that because I do identify with that. But I thought, okay, let's add a 30-second intro that has nothing to do with the rest of the song. And let's let him do some weird thing. Cause he's a very accomplished guitarist, and he uses really weird effects and stuff, very Wilco-esque, and kind of stuff. And he came in and he played, I think, 3 or 4 tracks through. And then there was this moment where he did this kind of wail sound, this kind of thing. And I thought, oh my God, what is that? I love that. And then finally, when we stitched, we picked a few of his takes and moments of his takes, and we stitched them together. And I thought, that's it. That's perfect, because it doesn't feel like anything like a pop song at all anymore. It feels like something different, but it's going to be attached to a pop song. And then when we have his solo, it's this big, huge kind of, it kind of like roars in. That also isn't formulaic for a pop song. So he, with just a couple of things, he took a pop song and made it into something a little bit different, a little bit skewed. So now when you finish it, you're like, that was a pop song, but that wasn't like bubblegum. There was some sustenance to that, a little bit more than there was before. So just very proud of what he did. And for me, when I listen to my record, because by the way, I listen to my record, I listen to it all the time. I'm very proud of it. When I listen to it, that's one of my favorite moments when that solo comes in. I'm just like, yeah. And I'll listen to it like if I'm working out and that comes in, I'm like, yeah, that's so awesome. So anyway, yeah. Dude, thanks for playing it, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Great stuff. Holy cow.
Yeah. Anyway, and by the way, thank you for all of the work that you're doing. You're doing all of these lyric videos for me, and I'm tagging you in YouTube and everything, and they're just beautiful, really well done, and I'm very excited to see the Take It All one.
Oh my God. That one's intense. I'm really excited about that one too, for sure. It turned into this thing that I was like, oh, I have an idea, and all my ideas were just not working out. They were crap. And then Todd wanted to do that track for the episode. And I was like, crap, I need to find an idea that works right now, because I've been working for a month on this thing and all these ideas are terrible. And then I was like, I had been chewing on this. It's a play on 2 things, the old Kanye West Through the Wire. Like, I've always been fascinated with that music video, and I've always wanted to do my version of it. And then combining that with the Aha Take On Me classic. And I was like, oh, I'd love to combine some of these ideas. And so I just kind of in an afternoon shot this thing in my living room that I'm excited about. It's fun, especially for, a zero budget, film.
Dude, it's beautiful.
Thanks, man.
It's so well done. And I watched it several times. I'm just like, wow, I cannot believe you just shot this in your living room. It's insane.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So we're excited if we can get to that finish line, and intact, like our hair's on fire and all that stuff. But and then after that, dude, I finally think I know what I want to do for the dance video we were talking about. Oh. I got to run a test, but I can't focus on the test until I finish this thing. And so finding time to sit and draw for, I think it's going to take something like 30 hours of drawing to finish it. It's all good, bro. It's nice once you get into it. The question is my drawings, how you have Uncanny Valley?
Yeah.
Where you're looking at an imitation of a human and it's not close to being a human. And you're like, that feels wrong. That's how my drawing is. It's like, it's not sketchy enough to be a sketch and it's too close. And so I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work. And so I might have to draw worse.
Yeah. I was going to say take away.
Yeah, I might have to take away or draw way better. And so I don't know which it is yet.
Oh, so you mean you're just going to have to get as good as Ian at drawing immediately? Okay.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Just overnight, yes. So I'm excited about all these things. It's fun, man. I love that you give me creative freedom to just, play in the pen and coming up with some of these ideas with you is like really fun. And so all of it to me is just great exercise of creativity. And when I'm working on all this other stuff, I feel so much, I don't want to say pressure, but I definitely feel like I need to play to something else instead of just to us, you and I, or the audience and the client for this. And so that gives me a great sense of like freedom, I think. And that's fun for me. So I appreciate you letting me play in your sandbox.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, if I didn't like something, I would tell you.
Thank
and
you.
You know that,
Yeah.
but everything that you've done has been like, wow, that's really interesting and intriguing. And they're all different and they're all from a different space. And they've got like an interesting thing about it that has something to do with the song itself. And I mean, you're a musician yourself, so you understand that kind of thing. And so I think that it just comes off really great every single time. So yeah, well done.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Check the show notes, people. I'll be embedding Todd's stuff as we get it available on each of these episodes. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, baby. Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts, share us with your friends. It all matters more than you know, for real. Join us not next week, but the week after. We'll be doing Napoleon. Cannot wait for that. Go check that out in the theater. I think it comes out on Tuesday, or it'll be out by the time this episode's out.
Yep.
And go watch some movies. I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.